All right. Okay, so we have three current seniors here. You want to go around and introduce yourselves?
Hi everybody, I'm Harry, senior economics ACMS, surprisingly. Yeah, my thesis is on how election results affect migration rates in the US.
My name's Anna. Of course, I'm a senior. I'm originally from originally from Wisconsin, but I now live in Welsham. I'm a double major in economics and computer science, and my senior thesis is on allocation design.
Hi, everybody. I'm Angel, senior two. I'm major in sociology and econ, and my thesis is about language classes in Hawaii.
Hi, and I am Professor Buckles. I'm a faculty member here in the Department of Economics. I do research on economics of the family, and I teach that class, but relevant for today, I teach the senior thesis workshop that all honors thesis students take in the fall.
So we'll talk more about the details of like what that looks like. Coursework, timeline, honors versus non-honors as we go. I'm of course Spence. I'm here for the details. I'm the director of undergraduate studies. I'm the one that sends you salty emails about various announcements. That's actually, yeah, that's it. I teach, I know a handful of you. Yeah. So I think what we want to do initially is we're just going to open up and let you ask those current seniors about their experiences with writing a thesis, and then we'll talk a little bit about, what do we hope that you will get out of this process? Logistically, what does it look like? What are the next steps and things like that?
Misunderstood. I thought we were going to do panel. So maybe we give them a little information first to inform their questions. If we do that, and then then we can.
Perfect. Here are 4 or maybe more reasons why you're right at these. And actually, as we're going, so I am going to kind of constantly thank you guys. Feel free to agree or disagree with these. Now that you saw this last year, you can see whether this is false advertising or not. The first thing is like, this gives you a whole lot of space to actually dig in on an idea and hopefully become some sort of expert in it. And like, do you guys feel like an expert on your topic?
More than I was thinking.
Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it.
And so it really is just like trying to give you space in your senior year, it's your last year here, to sort of drill down on something you're interested in that you'd like to learn more about, ultimately become an expert on, and have that space to do that. Now, what does that mean? Like, what is the process ultimately that we're going to try and get you there? It's like, learn how to conduct independent research, to examine a question in depth or test a hypothesis. What do we want that to mean is like, you've been taking these econ classes and other classes for the past 3 years. We would like for you to actually be able to put them towards use or something that you're intrinsically motivated to learning more about. Okay, like why have you been taking econometrics? Not just so that you can satisfy a prereq for econ of the family, right? So that ultimately, you can kind of use this framework to do something independently. Okay, that's sort of a culmination of your time here. There's a second bullet point here about enhance your analytical and organizational skills. Certainly enhance your analytical skills. I mean, actually putting these things into practice and forcing yourself not just to answer problem sets and things like that, to kind of figure out, what are the next steps I need to do analytically and then get over those challenges is like a new skill to some degree relative to the things you've been doing. Organizational skills, to what extent are those a challenge? And do you feel like you've developed?
I mean, the workshop's very helpful for that. I'm way more organized on this project than on a lot of other ones at this point, because you kind of have to be. And I feel like I've learned some good tips for going forward. Yeah.
I'd say like the thesis is like an entirely different beast than anything else you've probably done in academics up till this point, just kind of given the scale of it and the number of different sections and the number of different undertakings you do across those sections. I mean, from your lit review to your actual analysis, like it uses completely different parts of your mind. So in order to like have like a decent product at the end of it, it will force you to learn organizational skills.
I advertise it as like learning to be a project manager. Your thesis is your project, and that's a skill that like no matter what you end up doing in your career, some of you may actually someday have the title project manager, or may also find yourself doing that as part of another job. This is like a first chance to see a project through from start to finish. Like this.
And then the structure is, the fall, take the workshop. Part of that is organizational, hitting some deadlines, but then Second semester, sort of you're on your own with your advisor, kind of talk about what that interaction means. But it is, you know, sort of pushing you towards being more independent and getting things done on your own timeline. Along those lines, you know, regular interaction with a faculty member, that would at first glance, I mean, I don't know, I see this, I'm like, ah. But no, no, but actually, when I think back to being 21 years old, or actually what got me into economics in the first place was actually like, I liked the way that my econ professors thought about questions and thought about problems. I have benefited a ton along the way from having interactions with faculty members at undergraduate and graduate level. Like that was a huge part of my development as an economist, was just like having these conversations and being able to ping somebody who thinks with a particular side of their brain or whatever, a particular structure that we've been trying to, you know, inculcate in you. So that is another benefit. And then just sort of fourth bullet point, you know, like just in general, like learning to be a good writer, learning how to distill a technical question, a response to a technical question into something that's a little bit less technical, but just also doing the technical writing itself is an important skill to develop. You really like ChatGPT is not like completely done away with this.
Ask them, don't ask me.
Well, ChatGPT does do a great job with econometrics. So,
Okay.
yeah, you definitely have to.
All right. Now, a little bit more kind of general in addition to those things is like we actually like to think of this as an experience that's a little bit transformative in a way that's broader than, hey, you're going to actually put some econometric tools into practice that, you know, towards something that you're interested in. You know, just broadly, this is like a chance for you to engage in something that's a year long where, you know, you're going to be doing this unique experience to see what research is actually like. You know, facing some sort of challenge, putting in some effort where at the end of the year, you actually have something tangible. Like I still have my undergraduate thesis, it's bound, it's actually in my office. I know exactly where it is. It's a little bit silly, but it's true. Like I am proud of like having something tangible at the end of the year, of the year a long time ago. You know, kind of pushing yourself in terms of your intellectual capabilities, persistence, determination. All those things are sort of rah-rah, maybe kind of pie in the sky, but like they're actual things that we want you to engage with that maybe you would get from this experience that you wouldn't get if you were doing something else, right? What are other motivations potentially? You know, we give some awards at the end of the year for best senior honors theses, posters, there's cash prizes. You win a library award that also has cash associated with it. Those are also reasons to do it. And this is less common, so we definitely don't want to post this as like a modal experience. But some people who've done senior theses in the past have ended up co-authoring papers with faculty members. Some of these people have gone on to graduate school, not all of them have, so it's not sort of like you necessarily have to be thinking about a PhD in order to be thinking about this, but if you were, if this would help. Yeah. Okay, turn it over to you.
Yeah, so since I will be, especially for those of you who are on the honors track, which is the majority, but not all of our thesis writers. But if you are on that track, I'll be doing the thesis workshop. Maybe it's a good time for me to talk about what exactly that thesis is. So you have undoubtedly written term papers. If you have taken a writing intensive class, like my economics of the family class, you might have done something more independent and more substantive within economics. But this is a step up yet from that. So, you know, just in terms of practical, people always like to know like how long is a thesis. They tend to range from something like 25 to 40 pages. But if you think about, surely in your economics classes, you have read an economics journal article. That is what we're aspiring to, right? So something that's written in that style, roughly of that length, and importantly, tells us something that we did not already know about the world. Now, getting it into a journal, something that's a contribution of that level and of that quality, as Forrest said, is something that is aspirational, not expected, but making some small contribution is something that you're all very capable of. And that's, you know, part of the reward is knowing that you created some knowledge, right? So it is a new answer to an open question. And it is independent, so much more so than even what you would have done in your classes, your writing intensive classes. So I like to think about your advisor, they're sort of like your driver's ed instructor, right? They are there to make sure that you do not totally drive off the road or injure yourself or somebody else, but you are the one driving the car, all right? They cannot make it go, they cannot make it stop. That's totally under your control. So I hope that's something that you would find exciting, but you need to be aware that that's what it is. I think sometimes people have the expectation that your advisor is just like another professor for a class where they give you assignments and you just go back and do it. This is much more independent than that. It is a journey, as these students who are very near the end of it will tell you, a journey with a guide, but a journey nonetheless. You know, it's meant to take the full time of your senior year. A big part of the senior thesis workshop is to help you front load that, because we were finding that without the workshop, people were putting it off until the spring, and that led to a lot of stress and also lower quality work than we knew people were capable of. So we're gonna try and help you do that as a year-long process. Yeah, and then really, as Forrest has already emphasized, this is a chance to really become an expert on something, and hopefully something that you really care about. Right? We spend a lot of time in the beginning of the workshop, and sometimes people do this over the summer, but we make sure that definitely by fall break, everybody has zeroed in on their research question. And as part of that, we're always asking, what is going to make you want to keep working on this in January and February and March as much as possible, right? And then I know there are things that you're all passionate about in the world, you know, politics we heard about. Anna's thesis, as she may tell you more about, was motivated by her direct experience with student government and her desire to want to make a process better. Right, so you have that opportunity to do that within your thesis, all using all of these wonderful tools we've been giving you in these classes all along the way. So a chance to really kind of put a capstone on your experience, put all of that theory and econometrics, economic thinking to good use. So in terms of what people tend to write about, we'll hear a little more from these three, but I chose them in part because I think they're a pretty good representative. I did try to get a more macro style person here, but none of them were able to make it. You know, Anna's a good example. Her paper is mostly theoretical, where she's trying to understand the different forces at play in the student government's model for allocating funds to student organizations, the different incentives that people face. So she's built a model for that. We have some students this year doing more political theory, one doing econometrics, theoretical econometrics. So there's some scope for that. That said, I would say that probably 80 to 90% of students do an empirical paper. So something that is more, you know, often what we call reduced form, if you remember that language from your metrics or other classes, where you're trying to estimate the causal effect of something on something else, or some other, you know, reveal some other relationship in the data that we didn't already know about. And then sometimes some combination of those, which I guess Anna's is actually good at that because she's brought in some data from student government itself.
Yeah, I'll be doing like some back of the envelope type calculations, nothing too in depth, but like it's predominantly theory with a little bit of empirical analysis.
So the research class, I will say, because so many students do empirical papers, we do set it up, you know, we remember our status skills, and we learn about things like how to do a data use agreement. And we talk to the economic subject librarian, who has a lot of things that he offers, but that includes tips on how to access data. So we do spend a fair amount of time on that. But you know, I really try to adapt the assignments and the materials so that if that's not what you're doing, it's still a useful class for you. So Anna's nodding. I will take that as an indication that we are somewhat successful in that. Okay, back to Forrest here for some of the advising type details.
Yeah, okay, okay, so just in terms of logistics, what this would look like is, this is, okay, so if you do the senior thesis, the non-honors thesis, what you're gonna enroll in is Econ 47970 for both semesters, so for fall and spring of your senior year. If you do the honors track, you'll be enrolling in Econ 43962 in the fall, and then this 47970 in the spring. And you need departmental approval to do all of these. When I talk about the application for the honors program, then look, I'll make sure to make a note then about kind of like how the timeline clears in terms of course registration. Long story short is, when class registration opens for you all, it's before the deadline for the honors application, so you won't be registering for this, but we'll make sure that you have a spot. Okay, so you don't have to worry about any sort of constraints along those lines. All right, now, in terms of like, if you think about, hey, all right, if you're an econ major, you have to take 4 electives. If you're an international econ major, yes. Are there any international econ majors in here? That simplifies things. Okay, so.
Although they might be on the Zoom watching later, so you might.
Yeah, okay, so you have to do 2 electives plus the senior research project. Essentially, these 2 thesis courses count as 2 40,000 econ writing intensive courses, because they're advanced electives that are writing intensive. If you do the honors track, the main thing to note is that you have to take an additional 43,000 level elective. That 3 in the second spot designates that it's writing intensive. Okay, so we offer a sort of menu of 43,000 level courses every semester. At some point before you're done, you have to have taken a 43,000 level course in order to satisfy the honors requirement. For any sophomores in here, we'll kind of later on we'll tell you about, or maybe you want to try and front load that. But if you haven't taken one yet, that's fine. You're just going to have to take one before you graduate, in addition to the 2 semesters of the thesis. Okay, and then for international econ students, year-long thesis replaces that senior research project, the 1 elective.
Can I just add a couple
Yeah,
of things
please,
about
yeah.
this, because this is always confusing for the students in the class. The thesis counts as writing intensive, but at the same time, if you're in honors, you need an extra writing intensive. So I know that's kind of what you said, but that's a different way of putting it. It doesn't get you out of it because you're adding an additional requirement for writing intensive. The other thing, just about your registration, we will save spots for you, so there's no sort of planning or urgency in that sense you need to be worried about. But they are Monday and Wednesday at 2 and 3:30. I already know the times, and so you might think about that when you're planning your other classes, that you will be in those afternoons.
Okay, just drilling down more on the honors versus the non-honors track. So if you were honors, non-honors, I mean, the senior thesis is open to all econ and international econ students or majors. If you do the honors track, you have to meet a GPA requirement. So if you look on the website, it's a little bit of a complicated logic. It's either you have to average an A- in stats, you have to average an A- in intermediate micro, intermediate macro, and econometrics, or instead of an A- average in those 3, you have to average an A- in both of the principles, both of the intermediates, stats and econometrics. Okay, if you average an A- in one of those 2 bins, then you satisfy for this honors GPA requirement. You have to take, so beyond the core, if you're a general econ major, you have to take 4 electives. Okay, if you do the honors track, essentially what you will be doing is you'll be taking at a minimum 5 courses instead of 4. You could think about that as being 3 electives plus the 2 thesis courses. So it sort of expands that 4 to 5. And then of those 3 electives, one of those has to be 43,000 level. I think that makes sense. Okay. You have to apply on the website. If you just Google Notre Dame Econ Honors, it goes right to it. If you try and navigate there directly on the website, we have a new website. It's been updated. It's now much harder to find. If you're Glenn or you're doing if you have a thesis requirement for maybe like the Sheedy program is sort of new.
The education initiative.
Yeah, right. Or if you're a sustainability minor and you have like a capstone requirement, we in almost most cases we can figure out how to make them complementary. If you're Glenn, that's the most common one. This is certainly complementary to Glenn. Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to talk about this. One of the first things you will do if you commit to this thesis project will be try to find an advisor, right? We have not been as clear about saying this in the past, so I really wanted to drill down on it today. You should really try to do that before you leave for the summer, right? This is gonna require you to ask a faculty member to be your advisor, and they will probably wanna meet with you, and it's just much easier to do that when everybody is still on campus, right? So that should be your goal. That said, I will be working with anyone who has not found an advisor by the time you leave over the summer to try to help create a good match, right? But another reason to try to be on top of that is because, as I say down here a little bit lower, you know, our faculty are limited in the number of thesis advisees they can take on. And, you know, really popular professors who teach engaging classes, you know, we all do in economics, every one of us. But, you know, if somebody has recently taught a class that really lit a fire under a bunch of students, and they may have a bunch of students who are wanting to have that faculty member as their advisor, and they will not be able to take everyone. We usually tell people to take 1 to 2 thesis students. Our assistant professors, we say 1, because we're trying to, you know, help them balance all the different things we're asking them to do. So if you really have your heart set on a particular faculty member, you may want to try to talk to them sooner rather than later, right? The ways that you might go about trying to think about who your advisor would be. If you have that person that you've had a class with, especially if it is in their area, you know, we had this class on education. I'd really like to drill down further on something that we touched on in the class, but didn't go in depth on. You know, that would be a good match for a faculty member, somebody to approach first. But if you don't have that person, but you have an interest in mind, just look over our faculty profiles on the website and get a feel for which faculty members are working in the area that you are interested in. I'm going to send all the faculty members an email in the next day or two and tell them to expect some cold emails, cold calls. That's totally normal to just reach out to somebody if you have a good reason to think they might be a good match for you.
And you can also sort by area.
On
So
the
if you're
website.
interested in labor, if you're interested in monetary policy, you can drill down faculty by those particular topics.
Yep. So given that we're suggesting that you suggest by topic, this, you know, implies that you have some idea of what you want to do your thesis about. You may not even be quite there yet, but this is the moment to try to start to think about, at least in terms of field or methods, what kind of thing you think you might want to do. To help you find an advisor and also give you some inspiration for potential topics, we have created this topics database. So that's what this QR code links to if you go to it. Each of our faculty members, we've asked them to list what their field is, but also to try to list, you know, 2 or 3 different research questions that they might be interested in pursuing with a student. So there, the idea is not that you find one on that list and that's your thesis, but it's just to give you a sense for what kinds of questions that faculty member might be a good fit for, right? But again, by the end of the semester is what's recommended. If you do not meet that goal, I will be hounding you over the summer. We absolutely want everybody to come into the fall with an advisor that's agreed to work with them over the next year. We'll talk about advisors, so maybe I'll hold off on asking for the questions on that for just a second. Okay, so whoops, I hit too many. I think that's what's next.
All right, on the website, the stated deadline is April 24th, 2025. What you're gonna do on there is you're basically just gonna enter in what your grades are in the various types of classes to make it easy for us to figure out whether you made a GPA requirement. And then I think there's a place where you can submit, like, here's my potential advisor, but you don't have to have one at that point. But I basically just wanna keep track of, hey, these are the people who are interested in pursuing the honors track. It's also not binding if you apply, but you know, and it's also not really, the selectivity is, like, if you meet the GPA requirement and you wanna do it, good, we're gonna facilitate, we'll make sure you can do it, okay? So it's not like we're gonna deny you at some point after this. It's basically just helps us keep track. After April 24th, if you're doing the honors track, you will register for the honors thesis workshop. I'll send you an email, or Jody Mashila will send you an email that basically says, like, hey, we have to process some sort of approval in the system in order to allow you to register for that. But we'll let you know. We're not gonna run out of space. But do be thinking about the timing of the classes, so Monday, Wednesday 2 and Monday, Wednesday 3:30. Yeah, and then I guess, Casey, you mentioned sort of what the spiel on what the workshop is.
But I will say the deadlines is a piece. So to try to help keep you on track, there will be things like turn in a draft of your literature review, turn in a data analysis plan, turn in your estimating equation. From comments on the SIFs, I won't put any of them on the spot, but people find those little markers along the way really helpful in keeping on track and getting feedback from somebody that's not your advisor, me, but also your classmates, the other people that are going through it. And I'll say that's another advantage of the workshop is my goal is that you build a community of fellow thesis writers. So you'll be in there with people who are going through the same thing, so you can commiserate, you can form a community, and especially in a major that's as large as ours is in economics, I think it's really nice that you have this opportunity to, interact, engage as much as we do within the workshop.
So really quick, mainly for sophomores, try to take 40,000 write-intensive electives next year prior to senior year. If you're a current junior and you've not done that, it's okay. But one of the ways you can sort of exercise your skills in terms of why did you take these core courses in the first place? Like why did you take intermediate micro, intermediate macro econometrics? Those are the prereqs for the 40,000 level electives. Once you use those tools, apply to something, the right intensive electives are also going to expose you to econ research. We employ people as research assistants for faculty members. You can also, if you want to, you're welcome to cold email faculty members and just say like, hey, do you need help being, with any projects? I'd love to work as an RA or something like that. This is sort of less important, I think, for econ. Feel free to disagree with this, but less important for econ than it would be for maybe other disciplines. A lot of what we are working with is going to be public use data. And there's less travel involved typically than maybe in some other majors. But there may be the case that you need proprietary data, software, things like that.
I would say out of 30 some students, I have 2 or 3 every year that end up needing a thesis grant, so.
Yeah, okay, great.
Comes up.
ISLA, the Institute for the Studies in the Liberal Arts, provides the senior thesis grant up to $1,500. If you're Glenn, there's funding for research. If you're associated with any of these billions of other groups, there's probably funding available. If you want help exploring that, feel free to email me. I'm also, what I'll probably do if I'm not immediately aware, is just refer you to something like ISLA or CUSE is another one that I might refer you to. But that's something to think about. The senior thesis guidelines are on the website. I think it's something it has to be at least 25 pages and whatever and things like that. But it might be useful just to look at it, just to sort of think about what the structure is. I'm a little bit poo-pooing that because, did you guys have trouble meeting 25 pages? It's you work on this paper for a year and you've got figures and you've got tables and all these things. It's not the page count that's going to get you. Okay, yeah. It's put in all the work in order to fill out the tables and things like that. That's what's going to get you, not the page count.
And they're so idiosyncratic that it's hard to have a common set of guidelines anyway.
Yeah.
As these guys will tell you, it's really your advisor who's in charge of evaluating and making sure that you've met the standards. And so as long as you're having an early and often conversation with them about whether you are doing what they expect of you, you're in good shape in terms of.
That's right, yeah. All right.
Yeah. So now, I think you can stay here. You don't need to move to the middle if you don't want. But the panel, Forrest and I are all happy to take, Professor Spence, I should say, happy to take any questions.
What part feels the most daunting? Just quick spitball. TJ, what feels daunting?
I guess how would you guys say it is balancing a pretty major research obligation, right? Writing a pretty significant or high quality paper with just kind of other classes and everything like that.
I was talking to Professor Buckles before this started, so I am a chronic overcommitter and I did that my senior year. Nonetheless, it's very possible to balance your senior thesis with other classes, so that thesis workshop, to remind guys, it's 3 credits, so it's built into your schedule to occupy your time outside of class as well. So it's like an opportunity for you to make progress directly alongside your classes. It's integrated in a way that makes it possible to balance it. I think Harry and I can also both speak to having pretty intensive extracurricular
Yeah.
commitments.
Yeah, I would say like, it's definitely, like, if it's like, it'll probably take about as much time as like your busiest class, like it's gated on the busier side. That being said, like, it's much more flexible than a class, like, if you have a really bad week, like, a lot of your goals you're setting yourself, so, you know, as long as you hold yourself accountable, you can kind of work around it. Like, I do a lot of my work in like long spurts, like, I don't like really work on it every day, I'll pick like, especially now, like 1 or 2 days a week where I'll work on it like more, but I kind of, you know, leave it to that. As long as you schedule yourself and like work, like, which is nice, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the senior, like the thesis class you were taking in the fall really makes it better. In a way that in the class you would have deadlines, as Professor Bob talked about, like of when to turn in a review, that they were did that. Then after that in the spring, it's sort of like you have built your own pace and that's sort of on your own from the spring, so.
And I should add one thing that we do in the workshop. It's about like 2/3 content, but about 1/3 what we call work labs. And that's just, you're coming in and you are gonna work on your thesis for 75 minutes here amongst your classmates as a way of just really making sure that people dedicate time for it. So hopefully that helps people stay with it too. And then we learn skills for how to be productive in a 75-minute time period and how to stay on track with a big project like this.
So another thing I would say is that I met not a lot of, like a few group of students that I can work with in the thesis class. So that's a very good way to hold like each other accountable. If like one day I don't really want to work, but then we have like scheduled work labs, so my partner would email me and be like, "Where are you?" So that's sometimes it's not very self-motivated, so that's a really good way to.
Can you guys speak to how you kind of honed in on your topic and then how you found an advisor that was suitable for that?
I think that's the hard part, in my opinion, is finding your topic. I knew I wanted to do something that like I'm in the PPE minor, and I didn't want to do something that intersected with politics. But I really worked out my question more like with my professor, like once I already had an advisor, like I had a couple model papers. I like knew I wanted to do something in the same area as those papers. But like slowly work through it. I would say the big 3 things are it's gotta be like somewhat like novel or interesting or like interesting or important. It's gotta be interesting to you and it's gotta be feasible. Those 3 things are hard to balance. But that being said, like one of the big things I made was I waited too long to like try and reach out to advisors because I wanted to have like my idea really set before I like ask people. Don't make that mistake. Like if you have like a general area, like, start emailing people and they can help you. Also you can ask ChatGPT what like available data sources there are. That's very helpful. Just go like in this area, what are the free available data sources? And ask what question can I answer from that? That's very helpful.
I'd say for me, so I'm in Blinn, so like I've known all along that I have to write a thesis, but I really had no sense of what I wanted that thesis to be. So I started out by thinking in terms of a paper I wrote junior year that I really enjoyed. It was on like GDPR, like privacy law type stuff. And I'm like, oh, that'll be my thesis topic. I'll just do something like that. I talked to one professor, he was like, I don't think that I'm the guy for you, but you should talk to this other guy. So then I go and I meet with him and he's like, he more or less says like, I don't know why you're in my office. And he starts telling me about his research that he does. And it was on market design. And kind of in the office was with that professor was when I was like, wait, I have this extracurricular. It kind of sounds like the type of thing you do. And like I quickly did like a left turn and pitched it. And he was like, yeah, that'd be a great thesis topic. And that was how I did it. So I spent several weeks thinking about GDPR stuff. And then I ultimately decided what my thesis topic was going to be in about 30 seconds in a meeting with my now advisor.
I would say for me, choosing the topic was not that hard because I've always been interested in language/education stuff. But for me, I got moved around for advisor several times. But then, I would say I got lucky because my advisor, current advisor, Mr. Jenny, has a really good data set. And his project sort of aligns with my interest. So I sort of just joined his team and worked with him whilst doing my thesis. So I would say, I don't think it's a common thing for people to do, you know, it's sort of like an RCT that you don't really know if you receive the treatment or not. But I think it worked out pretty well that, for a long time, also we were stressed because I was moved around professors and I was like, oh, all of my other friends are settled down for their topics and advisor, but I'm still sort of in the air. But from now, like looking back, I don't think that's an issue. So if you ever, you know, run into something like that, I don't.
That's part of my job, is to help you if you find yourself in that situation. So with Angel, it was just like personnel changes in the department, and people being, you know, like overcommitted and things that left her moving around a little bit. But as long as you're engaging with me, I will work with you to find you somebody. And you should not be at all offended if a faculty member says, I'm not gonna take you on. Because it may be because of these constraints that we're facing. More likely, it's that we're just trying to find you the best match. So anytime I have had to tell more students no than I have said yes to over the years, just for these reasons. But anytime I say no, I say, but here's who you should try to talk to, and I try to facilitate that. So hopefully the faculty member would do that, but please don't take it personally if you get a couple of no's to start.
What would you guys say is kind of like the most challenging part of like the whole process, like start to finish, like as you kind of reflect back on the whole thing?
I'd say getting started with your analysis. So, the thesis workshop is really helpful to like frame your question, but the analysis is like a really daunting part of the entire process. And at least for me, I kind of dragged my feet in like actually getting into it. But as soon as you can like make it over that hill, then everything starts to flow more smoothly. So it's really a mental piece. It's just motivating yourself to do the work. And once you can jump that barrier, then you're on. I'm not gonna say smooth sailing, but you're definitely heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I would say more or less analysis. But for me, more like data processing, because we have very data sets. So the average time for running one of my 5 loops is like an hour. So it's very annoying that if I made a very small mistake, I wouldn't know until an hour later. So there are 2 witnesses actually during my remembrance. They saw me struggling in the library. Like almost every week last semester. But I would say like it's a very critical process. It's kind of a crazy thing to say that. But I think I learned a lot in terms of like how to code, like how to navigate data, more technical things for my thesis.
I already said about that. I think the hardest part is finding your questions, but I think that's probably true. Second hardest part for me is definitely cleaning the data, just getting into it. Like my data set is very large, and it's it can be a real process, but don't underestimate that. Like it's not just like the zeros or remove the missing values. Like very often you're gonna have to do like a lot of like, or at least for me, I had to do a lot of merging, a lot of like finding, cleaning. ChatGPT is also helpful with that. But yeah, that's a big process, but it is good to like get into the like. Don't worry about this yet, but like in the fall, getting into the data early is helpful. Like just run like even if it's as like a very simple regression or something like that. See if you can get some summary stats. Like that stuff is like good to do as early as possible.
Well, Casey and I are here to facilitate you in any way that we can. Like we want for you to have this opportunity and to make it as sort of seamless and less daunting as possible. Yeah, so don't hesitate to reach out to either one of us or both of us. One thing we might do is, you know, sort of push you towards a current thesis student to talk about their experiences more. But yeah.
I think that's it. I mean, one thing I will last thing, that I don't think came up in Forest reasons to do this, but I was reminded with some of the skills they're talking about. I cannot tell you how many thesis students I've had come back to me and say that it was really helpful for them in their job search or in the job that
Oh,
they
yeah.
later moved on to. You will walk out of this with a writing sample that hopefully you are super proud of. And so that is something that a lot of employers are asking for, a lot of graduate programs. So that's, that paper itself is really helpful. People have been asked to talk about their thesis in their job interviews, and that's been something they felt like they could talk about really confidently and gave them an edge. So if you need additional external motivation besides the $1,000 prize or the, $100 poster prize, I think there's some real returns, in whatever it is that you decide to do next.
Thank you.
Yeah, please take some pizza as you leave. You don't want all that.